4 days later, the arms of this pincer had joined, cutting off the whole of the German armies in the Stalingrad area. Within the Iron Ring, the Russians began to liquidate the remaining German forces. The Stalingrad siege cost the Germans over 500,000 men and immense masses of war material. The German Sixth Army, which had spearheaded the drives into Poland and France, was completely destroyed. Among the thousands of prisoners taken were Romanians, led by fascists into war on the side of Germany. On February 5th, 1943, 24 German generals, as well as numerous other high officers, both German and Romanian, surrendered to the Russians. This is the Supreme Commander, Field Marshal Friedrich von Paulus. On the order of Marshal Stalin, salvos of 240 guns in Moscow celebrated the liberation of Stalingrad. This victory did more than save the Volga and the Caucasus. It decisively broke the last great German offensive. And together with the victories in Egypt and in the Pacific, it forever shattered the legend of German and Japanese invincibility. Dimly, still in the distant future, the end of tyranny could now be foreseen.
In January 1943, President Roosevelt flew to Casablanca in French Morocco for conferences with Prime Minister Churchill. General de Gaulle, leader of the fighting French, returned for the first time to French soil to attend the conferences. The main objectives for 1943 were outlined: to extend the initiative already won in 1942, to dispatch all aid to China and to Russia, and to rearm French forces for new offensives against the Axis. The slogan of the conference was unconditional surrender for Germany and Japan.
While the leaders were still conferring, the British had advanced into Tunisia and had made contact with the Americans who had fought their way through from the west. This is General Eisenhower, Supreme Commander of the Allied Forces, greeting General Montgomery, leader of the British Eighth Army. The British continued to hammer their way up the Tunisian coast. The German commander drew his reserves south to face their assault. But a sudden attack in great violence from French, British, and American troops along the whole line smashed through the German defenses. American armored forces thrust fiercely to the gates of Bizerta. By May 12th, it was all over. Bizerta and Tunis fell. The tables had been turned. French soldiers now were guarding German prisoners. Germany paid dearly for the Tunisian campaign. Added to huge losses in material, 30,000 were killed, 20,000 more were wounded, and 291,000 were taken prisoner. Tunis was the first important French city to be taken from the Germans. The people celebrated their long-awaited freedom. At dawn on July 10, 1943, Allied troops landed on the beaches of Sicily. With this first penetration of Italian home territory, the fascist government of Italy collapsed. Benito Mussolini, who had been dictator of the Italian people for 21 uninterrupted years, fell from power. On September 3rd, United Nations forces invaded Italy itself. On that same day, the new Italian government surrendered to the Allies. The bulk of the Italian fleet, in accordance with the armistice terms, escaped the Germans and surrendered to General Eisenhower and British naval officers at Malta. The great port of Naples was an early prize of the Italian campaign. The most valuable acquisition of the fighting in Italy was Foggia, captured by General Montgomery's 8th Army. With its elaborate network of airfields, Foggia gave the Allies, for the first time, bases within easy reach of German installations and war factories in southern Europe. Britain in the west was already a gigantic air base from which thousands of bombers and fighters were attacking the Germans by day and by night. In daylight, American pilots were over targets chosen for their importance to the German war effort. Factories, warehouses, railroads, submarine bases, shipyards, docks, airfields, and oil refineries. At night, bombers of the British Royal Air Force were over the great war production centers of Germany. American and British air forces took heavy losses, but destruction of Germany's industrial heart was essential before the Allied armies could organize actual landings in Western Europe. And most important, the power of the German Luftwaffe had to be destroyed. On the ground by fighters and attack bombers. In the air, by fighters and the crews of the flying fortresses and liberators.
The Russians early in 1943 had launched another powerful offensive. They drove across the great rivers of Russia. From Stalingrad, they smashed the Germans back from the Volga, across the Don, the Dnieper, Dniester, and the Prut to the Carpathian Mountains. In 6 months' time, they regained territory the Germans had spent 2 years and millions of lives to take. Thousands of towns were liberated. What survivors were left came out to give thanks to their deliverers. This is Marshal Zhukov, liberator of the Ukraine. At last, the guerrilla fighters who had fought so long behind enemy lines could come back to their homes.
Simultaneously, across the world, the United States Navy had attained sufficient strength for a drive across the Central Pacific. Their path lay through the Gilbert and Marshall Islands, which through the years had been heavily fortified by the Japanese. Powerful task forces built around new aircraft carriers led the way. Guns of America's new battle fleet shelled Japanese positions in advance of the assault troops. Carrier and land-based planes poured steel and fire on the defenders. Always upon the foot soldier that the ultimate decision rested. In the face of withering enemy fire, American Marines and Army troops made landings on tiny islands, Tarawa and Makin, Kwajalein and Eniwetok. Savage hand-to-hand struggles were fought for possession of a fly speck on the map, but these fly specks dominated hundreds of thousands of square miles of ocean.